England had conquered Wales. Its castles stood like iron walls across the mountains. Its king believed nothing could stop him. Then the North answered. A rebellion was born. That would shake England to its core, and a name would echo through history forever. Wales had fallen, and Edward's victory seemed complete. Across England, nobles celebrated the end of war. Banners of England flew across conquered lands. Stone castles now controlled the mountains. For the first time in years, England was at peace. But peace never lasts in the age of kings. Beyond the northern border stood Scotland. Independent, proud, unbroken, ruled by King Alexander III. His reign had brought stability. Trade flowed across the kingdom. Borders remained quiet. Few believed that peace could break. But in 1286, everything changed. King Alexander rode into the night. The weather turned against him. He continued forward anyway. Then disaster struck. The king fell into darkness. In the morning, Scotland had no king. Silence did not last long. The Scottish crown became a prize. Noble families began to move. Each believed they had a right to rule. Scotland slowly fractured. Alliances formed in secret. Promises were exchanged in shadows. Loyalty began to disappear. Fear spread through villages. No one could agree on a king. The kingdom stood divided. And division invites power from outside. News reached Edward in England. Scotland had no king. The crown was now in dispute. Chaos was spreading across the north. Most kings would see danger. Edward saw weakness. A kingdom divided cannot resist. Advisors urged caution. But Edward ignored them. He began planning his move. Scotland would be watched closely, and pressure would begin to build. Quietly at first. Then with intent. Scotland had not yet been invaded. But it was already under threat. Edward refused to wait for Scotland to choose its future. He demanded that Scottish nobles recognize his authority. Some nobles resisted immediately. Others saw an opportunity for power. Scotland became divided between loyalty and ambition. Edward summoned Scotland's claimants south. One by one, they arrived before the English king. Edward positioned himself as judge of Scotland's future. Many accepted his decision, but others saw something dangerous. Scotland was choosing a king. Yet England was gaining control. Edward finally made his choice. A Scottish noble named John Balliol would become king. Scotland finally had a ruler again. But many Scots were uneasy. Balliol wore the crown. Yet Edward held the power. Orders came from England. Scottish pride began to suffer. Balliol grew frustrated. He was king in name, but not in authority. Eventually Balliol pushed back. Edward answered with force. Scotland was invaded. Castles fell one after another. Balliol could not stop them. His army collapsed. His authority was destroyed. Scotland had lost its king once again. And into that vacuum, new leaders would rise. Not nobles, not kings, warriors. With Balliol gone, Edward tightened his grip on Scotland. Scottish castles flew English banners. English garrisons appeared across the kingdom. Officials arrived to enforce Edward's rule. Scotland was no longer being guided. It was being controlled. Many Scots refused to accept it. Resistance began quietly. English patrols vanished along lonely roads. Fear spread through the occupiers. Rumors began to spread across Scotland. Rumors of a fighter who never surrendered. A man striking from the shadows. A man gathering followers. His name was William Wallace. Wallace was not a king. He was not a great noble. Yet people began talking about him. His name spread from village to village. Stories followed wherever he went. Some called him reckless. Others called him brave. But everyone knew his name. More fighters started joining him. Then more arrived. Farmers left their fields. Hunters left the forests. Young men answered the call. Veterans returned to fight again. Rebel camps began appearing. Fires burned through the night. Plans were made in secret. Scouts moved across Scotland. Messages spread quickly. The rebellion was growing. English patrols became targets. Ambushes struck without warning. Soldiers disappeared from lonely roads. Supply wagons were attacked. English officers grew nervous. Wallace's victories multiplied. English patrols stood no chance. His followers grew bolder. Villagers openly supported him, bringing food and medicine for those injured. Scotland was beginning to wake up. Even the nobles could no longer ignore him. The rebellion now had a leader willing to challenge England itself. Edward finally understood the danger. This was no longer unrest. It was rebellion. Edward's commanders marched north to crush the rebellion. Thousands followed their banners. Knights rode at the front. Confidence filled their ranks. They expected another easy victory. Wallace expected them to think exactly that. He had chosen the battlefield carefully. A narrow crossing stood between the armies. Wallace positioned his men nearby. Then he waited. More followed behind them. Half the army crossed safely. Still Wallace waited. The trap was closing. Half the army crossed safely. English confidence grew stronger. They believed victory was near. Wallace raised his hand. The signal spread across Scottish lines. Then Scotland charged. Warriors exploded from the hills. English froze in shock. Orders were shouted everywhere. Nobody could organize the army. The narrow bridge became a trap. Men pushed against one another. Scottish spearmen struck hard. English soldiers fell into the river. Others tried to retreat, but retreat created more chaos. The English formation collapsed. Wallace drove his warriors forward. England's banners began to fall. The battlefield belongs to Scotland. Fear replaced confidence. Confidence became defeat. Defeat became disaster. Scotland had achieved the impossible. Stirling Bridge was theirs. England's army was shattered. News of the defeat spread quickly. Across Scotland, victory was celebrated. Across England, fear began to grow. Wallace had become more than a rebel. He had become a symbol. The news traveled south faster than any army. Across rivers, across forest, across the kingdoms of England, carrying a message Edward never expected. Stirling Bridge had fallen. England had been defeated. The king received the report in silence. No one dared speak. Wales has submitted. Scotland had resisted. And one name now echoed across the north: William Wallace. Farmers spoke his name. Warriors followed his banner. Songs were already being sung about. Scotland had found its champion. Edward stared toward the north. He had conquered Wales. He had built mighty castles. He has defeated powerful enemies, but Scotland refused to kneel, and Wallace refused to surrender. The war was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Edward would return, with a larger army, determined to crush the rebellion forever. Wallace knew that day was coming, and he was waiting. 2 leaders, 2 nations, 1 battlefield, a war that would decide the future of Britain. And next time, the hammer of the Scots would strike back.